Hi guys, this is Grandpa Gryman. Glad that you could be joining me today. Grandpa would like to start something new with you guys today. I know that all of you like reading books with Grandma. Every time you're on the phone, she reads the Wonky Donkey and some other books with you, and you really like that. But Grandpa would like to try reading some chapter books with you, some books that are a little bit longer. And here's what I have in mind. I'm going to send you some books. They look like this. They're chapter books. And I'm going to read and have you open your books and follow along. And that way we can read some stories. And I have 3 really good stories that we're going to start with. This is the first one that we're going to read. It's called Mr. Popper's Penguins. One of my kids, when they were little, took a blue magic marker and wrote over the title, but it says Mr. Popper's Penguins. And the man and the wife who wrote the story together received the Newbery Award, which means it was chosen as one of the best children's books back in the day when it was written. And it says illustrations by Robert Lawson, the man. So the man who wrote this book is also the one who drew all of the pictures. And the picture he drew on the cover is of him, Mr. Popper, and he's got a tuxedo on, which looks all fancy. And I think he wrote it, he drew it that way because all of the penguins look like they have tuxedos on, don't they? Before we get started, there's probably one thing we should probably point out. He talks a lot about the North and South Poles, so I thought we would take a look at my globe. I know some of you have a globe in your house, don't you? And the globe looks just like our world. Our world is round like a ball, and our world goes round and round. It spins like this, just like this ball. Well, if we go to the very, very top of the globe, up here around this green piece at the top, that is the part of the world that we call the North Pole. It is at the top of the world, top of the earth. And up there at the North Pole, we sometimes also call that the Arctic. It is very cold, and it is covered with snow and ice. And not many people ever go up there. It's not a good place for people to live, but there's polar bears that live up there. If we go down to the other end of the earth, down to the bottom end, down here, I'll give it a little spin, you can see that there's some land down there, and that land is called Antarctica. But down here at the bottom of the earth, we call that the South Pole, because it's at the south bottom part of the world. And it also is very, very cold down there. It's covered with snow and ice. And very, very few people have ever been to Antarctica. And nobody lives there all the time. It's just too cold. So you're going to hear him talk about North America, or the North Pole and the South Pole. And those are the 2 places he's talking about. Okay? Let's take a look at our book. Going to open it up. And we're going to go to this first page. Looks just like this. At the bottom, I see the number 3. And at the top, it says Chapter I. That's the letter I, like I am fine. I am reading this book to you. But sometimes the letter I can mean a number. And in this case, it's a Roman numeral 1. So that's another way of saying Chapter 1. That's where we're going to start today. It was an afternoon in late September. In the pleasant little town of Stillwater, Mr. Popper, the house painter, was going home from work. He was carrying his buckets, his ladders, and his boards, so that he had a rather hard time moving along. He was spattered here and there with paint and calamine, and there were bits of wallpaper clinging to his hair and to his whiskers, for he was a rather untidy man. The children looked up from their play to smile at him as he passed, and the housewives, seeing him, said, "Oh dear, there goes Mr. Popper. I must remember to ask John to have the house painted over in the spring." And there is the picture of Mr. Popper. He's carrying his ladder, and he's got some buckets and some paint and some rolls of wallpaper. And he's walking, so he must not have a truck. He just walks everywhere he goes. No one knew what went on inside Mr. Popper's head, and no one guessed that one day he would be the most famous person in Stillwater. He was a dreamer. Even when he was busiest smoothing down the paste on the wallpaper or painting the outside of other people's houses, he would forget what he was doing. Once, he painted 3 sides of a kitchen green and the other side yellow. The housewife, instead of being angry and making him do it over, had actually liked it so well that she told him to leave it that way. And all of the other housewives, when they saw it, they admired it too. So that pretty soon everybody in Stillwater had 2-colored kitchens. The reason Mr. Popper was so absent-minded means he sometimes gets mixed up, was that he was always dreaming about faraway countries. He had never been out of the little town of Stillwater. Not that he was unhappy. He had a nice little house of his own, a wife whom he dearly loved, 2 children named Janie and Bill. Still, it would have been nice, he often thought, if he could have seen something of the world before he had met Mrs. Popper and settled down. He had never had the chance to hunt tigers in India, or climb to the peaks of the Himalaya mountains, or dive for pearls in the South Sea. Above all, he had never been able to see the poles. That was what he regretted most of all. He had never seen those great shining white expanses of ice and snow. How he wished that he had been a scientist instead of a house painter in Stillwater, so that he might have joined some of the great polar expeditions. An expedition is when a bunch of explorers go on a trip to try to find new things. Since he could not go, he was always thinking about them. Whenever he heard that a polar movie was in town, he was the first person at the ticket window, and often he would sit through 3 shows. Whenever the town library had a new book about the Arctic or the Antarctic, the North Pole or the South Pole, Mr. Popper was the first one to check it out. Indeed, he had read so much about polar explorers that he could name all of them. And he could tell you what each one had done. He was quite an authority on the subject of explorers. His evenings were the best time of all. Then he could sit down in his little house and read about those cold regions at the top and the bottom of the world. As he read, he would take out his little globe that Janie and Bill had given him the Christmas before, and he would search out the exact spot that he was reading about. So now, as he made his way through the streets, he was happy because the day was over and because it was the end of September. When he came to the gate of his neat little bungalow, a bungalow is a cute little house, at 432 Proudfoot Avenue, he turned in. "Well, my love," he said, setting down his buckets and ladders and boards and kissing Mrs. Popper, "the decorating season is over. I have painted all of the kitchens in Stillwater. I have papered all of the rooms in the new apartment building on Elm Street. There is no more work until spring, when people will want their houses painted." Mrs. Popper sighed. "Oh, I sometimes wish you had a kind of work that lasted all year, instead of just from spring until fall," she said. "It'd be very nice to have you at home for a vacation, of course, but it is a little hard to sweep with a man sitting around reading all day." "I could decorate the house for you," he said. "No, indeed," said Mrs. Popper firmly. "Last year you painted the bathroom 4 times because you had nothing else to do, and I think that is enough of that. But what worries me is the money. I have saved a little, and I dare say that we can get along as we have other winters, but that means no more roast beef, no more ice cream, not even on Sundays." Shall we eat beans every day? Asked Janie and Bill, coming in from play. I'm afraid so, said Mrs. Popper. Anyway, go wash your hands for supper, and Papa, put away this litter of paints because you won't be needing them for quite a while. And that is the end of chapter 1. And the next time we start reading, we'll start with chapter 2. Well, it's good to be with you and read with you today. I hope you continue to come back and continue to read the rest of the book with me. Good to see ya. Bye.